Hello, chess tutor. Can you hear me? Okay, so I was watching another Google Hangout earlier on religion, and I witnessed something there that I found interesting. So uh, let me just step back a second and say that I'm talking to my friend on freechess.org, and I uh, am unable to get him to sign up. So I will respond to his comments and tell you what he's saying. Okay, so here's the story. I was watching a Google Hangout, and this guy named let me get his name. His name is Gibran, Jibran. He was talking on another guy's channel. I won't mention the other guy's name. And he was very intelligent. He's an atheist, by the way, and he said he basically went into a philosophical tangent to make a long story short. And then the guy got so upset he kicked him off his channel. So I wanted to just ask the general question: does philosophy have a place in religious discussions, or is it just about bashing Christians? You know, uh, is that the only play? Is it the only line of reasoning that's allowed in a religious discussion? So, uh, I want to see what my friend says in response to that. Okay, so my friend is asking, what did Gibran say? Uh, Gibran started talking about um, A and B theories of time, and so what he was doing is he was trying to say that there are questions of causality that come into religious discussions. He was trying to make a general point, but he was going into a philosophical tangent to make it. And so the people who he was talking to, they basically they got frustrated because he he's got to them maybe it was more like a chicken and egg puzzle. I'm really generalizing what took place, but that's how I see it. Is they see him going into a puzzle like there's philosophers do this. This guy was, I believe, is a graduate student in philosophy, and I saw right away his sort of approach to doing things when I saw him talk about this time A and B time theory in the middle of this religious discussion, and everyone in the chat just get really frustrated with him. Even though someone like me, who was also a philosophy major when I was back in university myself, I basically could relate to what he was saying, and I like kind of going into the weeds in those kinds of questions. Um, my friend's asking, was he far off topic? The answer is, I think in his own way, he wasn't off topic. He was, I mean, as an observer, I thought he was. I thought he was trying to make a technical point about the topic, about causality. They're trying to. Um, you can imagine a bunch of people talking in a chat channel. They were all atheists except for one person, the one person who's not an atheist basically had the position that they could be wrong on anything they believed. So the atheists were okay to have that person in their chat because the person openly, as part of their own position, was saying, "Well, nothing I say I believe could may be right," because the person, I guess, was open-minded about being able to reject anything they believe at any time. The atheists accepted them into their discussion. Yes, the other people. So my friend's asking, did the other people think he was off topic? And the answer is that yes, I think they thought he was, and there was maybe one or two. So an argument actually broke out amongst the atheists, which I'll get to in a minute. But basically, uh, the guy who runs the Hangout, the guy who had the controls, the ability to kick him off the Hangout, he got upset. And I guess he thought this guy was wasting everyone's time. And he wasn't willing to listen to the kind of the technical points this guy was trying to make about time, you know, these the A and B theory of time. Um, he wants, I guess, a more direct, more I don't know, visceral, maybe a more simple, in my view, examination of these religious issues. You know, I'll just say right up front, I guess I don't see the world that way, where it's just very simple to reject religion or accept it. I don't see it as a very as something that is such an easy thing to do. And so when people really want to get into all these how is the universe constructed and all that, it relates to my point I'm trying to make. I think sometimes you have to go along with it. It's not just an attempt to obfuscate. How do you say that? It's not just an attempt to confuse the discussion, if you know what I mean. Um, yeah. So Chess Tutor, what do you have any comments on that? If anyone else wants to type a comment, I'll respond to that as well. Okay, so while he's thinking about what he wants to say, let me just say generally that I uh, I run into something. What's his name again? Gibran. I run into his name is Gibran Ludwig. I believe that's his YouTube channel. I run into I've seen this guy run in. I've watched him on a couple of hangouts, and I've seen him get into this kind of trouble before, but not to this extreme where people were so pissed off. Um, but he's an atheist like them. He has the same position they do, but it was the way he examined the topic that got at least two of them upset, and one of them upset enough to kick him out of the chat room. So um, I'm a person who believes in, I guess the term I use is precision. Precision. I say this all the time in text chat when so I go on freechess.org and I chat in both the politics and religious channels all the time there. I'm Maple Leaf there if you want to talk to me there. I get into this same kind of problem all the time, and I call it precision. I want to be very precise on a lot of technical things to make sure that the whole big picture is somehow fitting together properly. And people get upset about that. They think you're saying things that are irrelevant because you're on you're on a tangent that you think is important and they don't. Um, so Chess Tutor says people often want you to say you believe or don't. Are you saying that they want you to say your position? Or are you saying they want to make that conclusion about what your position is? I notice there's a bit of a time delay from when I say something on YouTube to when people actually hear it, maybe up to 10 or 15-second time delay. This is also something of an experiment for me to mess around with Google Hangout. I'm very new to it. That's why I'm a little clunky on here. Okay, so Chess Tutor says they want you to make your position clear. Even if you aren't decided, make your position clear. And are you saying the person is not clear, I guess, when they get engaged in this type of behavior? While he's thinking about that, let me say that clear is a funny term, especially in philosophy. Clear, does it mean you say your position in a way that everyone understands you, or does it mean you're very precise about your position so that there's no ambiguity in what you're saying? I think those two are very different definitions of clear. I certainly feel very strongly about doing things in the second way that I just said. In other words, I feel strongly that people should be very precise about what they're saying, as opposed to being understandable. Because sometimes being precise, like think of a legal contract, right? Legal contracts are sometimes hard to understand, but they're also they're worded in a way that's very precise. So there's no ambiguity in what some of those clauses in the contract are saying, but because they talk like that, and they may even use jargon terms or other confusing terms in order to be precise. So to me, that's being clear, and in philosophy they call that clarification. Maybe it's a slightly misused version of clear if you are thinking that clear means easily understood. Maybe I should put this another way, that we could think of those as two conditions of clear, where you want to be precise in what you're saying, but you would also like to achieve being understood as well, like saying it in a way that everyone in the room understands what you're saying. Chess Tutor asks, if you don't know how you feel, how can you be clear? I think that's a good question, and the truth is, you are asking, especially if you're a philosophy type of person coming from that background, you are asking people to do a little bit of work and to get a little bit of an education. And I know that is almost a kind of arrogance that comes from people with a philosophical background, or actually a lot of technical backgrounds have that. They want the people they're talking to do a little work to catch up to their perhaps academic understanding of things, and I don't know. It maybe is it wrong? Is that asking people to come halfway, or is that being insulting and arrogant? I don't know. And was and this is something I suppose we can't, without looking at the actual videos that inspired me to have this discussion. Um, we also would be asking, is that guy acting like that? That I am talking about is Gibran Ludwig. Was he doing that when they kicked him off the Google Hangout? Let me just. I said I would say that the tell about how the atheists in their discussion got into an argument with each other. Well, after it wasn't actually the atheist. The person was the theist, and one of the atheists arguing with the guy who kicked him off. What happened is after he got kicked off out of the discussion, they broke out into an argument because I guess two or three of them felt, that wasn't really cool. The guy he's in a sense one of us. He doesn't believe in God's existence. He's one of us, and he's basically an intelligent guy, and you just kicked him off. And it seemed like overkill. And I think, so at least they were in agreement that this guy running the Hangout had overstepped what was correct behavior on his part. Chestuder's asking, you said something about not needing to take one side or the other. What did I say? I'm not sure what I said there. I'm trying to think back to what I meant. Not needing to take one side or the other. What did you say? Like, honestly, I'm not 100% sure what I was saying, so let me just kind of repeat something I said about what I believe about being clear, and let's see if that brings it back up. And so I think being clear is about being precise. So you say things in a precise way, and it can become jargonized. You could be referencing thinkers throughout history in order to say, so sometimes you've got a point that's very subtle, and so rather than repeat, let's say, 30 pages of subtlety, you say, well, like Thomas Hobbes, right? So you actually name drop, or you use a jargonized term. Some people, if they don't know what Thomas Hobbes said, or they don't know the jargonized term, just like if you're reading a contract, and there's so many terms in that contract that they don't understand, you get into the same position where I guess communication is not taking place. The person who's taking that quote-unquote philosophical approach is he's in his own way trying to do what he feels is right and proper when it comes to communication, but I guess in a sense he hasn't communicated, so maybe that's the other side of the coin. It had to do, oh, I see. Chestuder makes a good point. So we're used to chatting in text, right? And now we're doing this Google Hangout, which is audio. And with text, you can scroll back and see exactly what a person said. If they type something, you can, and then of course in audio chat, the person says something and we're not clear what he said. Well, now you got to go back and listen to the audio, I guess, or some other much more difficult process. So I think that's a good point. Definitely when I talk about really like when I get into the big philosophical stuff, I don't even go to any kind of chat. I prefer forums where people can literally type a couple of pages in an essay or whatever they want to do, for the same reason that it's more acceptable in a forum to really type a long answer and a technical answer. So apparently I have two people watching this video, so if you want to type something in the comments, I'll answer it. I'm still learning how to invite people as I do the Hangout. If someone wants to explain that to me, they can. Chess2 says, let's get back to the beginning question, and okay. Is there something you would like to say about that? So, Chess Tutor and I have been chatting for years. Mostly, we usually chat about politics, not philosophy. But I think from our political discussions, he might be able to say something about my behavior. I obviously, by watching Gibran, can observe something that maybe he has already observed in my behavior throughout the years, right? Does philosophy belong in a chat on religion? Yeah, the reason I'm asking it that way, and also science, the reason I ask the question that way is because philosophy, when it talks about religion, it's called philosophy of religion. And when it talks about science, it's called philosophy of science. And it's almost like they're having their own discussion, their own side discussion. And some people don't think what they have to say about science or what they have to say about religion is relevant to, I don't know, the bigger public discussion on religion or science. They're just having their own chat that no one can relate to. They're talking in their jargonized contract form. And so my question is, are they kind of putting, we're talking about philosophers here, philosophy majors, are they putting themselves outside the discussion, basically, by talking the way they talk? Are they making themselves irrelevant? Is philosophy irrelevant? Certainly in the philosophy channel on freechess.org, you hear it all the time. You know, philosophy is not a relevant subject. I hear that all the time. Of course, I disagree. Ask me a question, Chess Tutor, or someone else. While I learn Google Hangout. Does philosophy belong in a chat on religion? Some religion. Okay. Depends on the philosophy stated? Haha. That's a funny answer. Comparing religions. Do you mean philosophy can develop an expertise at comparing religions? Because if that's what you're saying, I actually find that a really interesting answer. If we're talking about a general question about philosophy and let's say its place in society, I think you are asking a very interesting question. if that's what you're asking. Okay, I didn't actually explain myself, did I? What I mean is, so when I was a student at a university, North American University, and taking philosophy, there was the question about philosophy's place in both society and even in the academic world. Does it serve any purpose? And one of the answers was, well, philosophy, what they do in anthropology is really philosophy. So anthropologists look at, for example, they can look at different cultures, different religions, and compare and contrast them. They their skill, which we would quote unquote be calling philosophy, is their ability to stand outside of that culture or religion in order to examine it, right? Normally, when we think of examining a culture, you have to stand outside of it so that those assumptions about culture are not being imposed on yourself, that kind of thing. And so those tools that they develop to do that. And so some people say, yes, philosophy should be doing something like anthropology, just comparing and contrasting cultures, developing a kind of uh, relativism. That's how I don't know what else to call it, but a kind of distance from values in order to examine the values of a culture, right? Because your own culture has values. How can you examine it without holding those neutral somehow? Chess Tutor goes, the timing of my laughs is important. If you miss the timing, ignore it. But the point is that I found it funny. I know it's hard for other people to see that. So while people are mulling over what I've said already, let me now throw another wrench into it. What about science, right? So in the case of religion, we're saying, okay, philosophers taking us off the course in order to talk about some side issue, talk about cosmology or something like that. If some people think that a discussion about religion should just be about the Bible, right? They don't want to really hear, and I'm talking about both theists and atheists. They don't want to hear anything about uh, like what this guy was doing. Have started trying to get into a discussion about time, theories of time. They don't want to hear any of that. They just want to you believe what the Bible says or you don't. I'm basically a totally against that way of seeing things. I completely disagree with it. So let me throw in science now. So we got something called philosophy of science. So now the philosopher comes in and starts talking about science, and I guess there's an assumption that they don't even understand that subject, like like the details of physics, the details of calculus, and yet they're going to make big conclusions and claims about science. Are they now engaging in even a bigger red herring, I would say, than when they talked about religion? Okay, so Chess Tutor says he had a course called Philosophy of Medicine. So let me ask you, did philosophy say anything relevant about medicine? Do you think what they had to say about medicine was important? Can a philosopher talk about medicine? That's a good question. The cat's meowing. Okay, so Chess Tutor says, I remember there was a difference in how people are treated when they're sick. It's okay to be lazy if you're sick. And it's philosophers that made this observation. So I guess when you're sick, you you get to do things that you don't normally get to do. You get to avoid work. Um, but so I guess generally I'm going to step back and say, okay, so is this an observation? Is this a philosophical observation? I see. I'm trying to think of what I would call a philosophical observation about medicine. Could be a question about how they evaluate evidence when they do research. It could be a discussion about the Food and Drug Administration, which is actually okay. So let's pull in a political tangent here. In the United States, you have a lot of people on the right, the Republicans and the Libertarians, attacking the Food and Drug Administration. Do they have Are their criticisms legit, or are they just bashing government? Did you know what I mean? Are they really saying something important, or are they just, I don't know, saying government is bad in another way, in a way that has no content? Oh, the philosophy course that Chess Tutor was in was 40 years ago. But still, it was interesting enough for you to remember it. It must have left some kind of impression if you're remembering it 40 years later. So some other questions that he got from his course, Philosophy of Religion, or Philosophy of Medicine, is what is disease? Does mental illness exist? There are all kinds of disease. What are TADs? He says, haha, I remember TADs. What are TADs? So, Chess Tutor, we talked about, you mentioned the advantage of having a chat in text. Having a chat in text, you can go back and see exactly what you typed earlier. You can scroll up. You can scroll the screen up and see exactly what a person typed. I think one of the advantages of audio chat or video chat is that you just don't have to type at all. You just sit back and talk. Oh, he's saying tad means a little bit. So it's funny because I'm doing exactly what I said. I'm scrolling back to see what it was he said. So this is another question. If if I were to chat more often in audio, would this mean that I have to take notes or something? Right. He says medicine is not my favorite subject. So what I am going to ask about that is it's the philosophical approach to it, right? That uh, another aspect, by the way, of philosophy and medicine, and this is actually something I had in my philosophy courses way back in the day, is the ethics side of it, bioethics they called it. So people in a hospital facing euthanasia, what what should doctors do? Do they go through some kind of ethical calculus to decide what their behavior is going to be when, let's say, someone's facing imminent death or pain, extreme amounts of pain, that kind of thing? Um, Now that's something I think you could more clearly argue a role for philosophy, because now they're actually when it comes to bioethics, they're actually arguing for actual action one way or the other. They're coming in and saying behave this way, and they're not just in the weeds on cosmological argument or ontological argument or something like that. They're So bioethics is in a sense is one of the more quote unquote practical branches of philosophy. So Chestuder says, my favorite philosophical topic is what is life and awareness. Now, philosophy to me means a lot of things. Um, there's it can mean worldview. So if someone says, I believe, well, even your religion could be your worldview. For example, I'm a Christian. That's that person's worldview. But I've this is the academic influence. I see in that within that academic context that philosophy means method, so logic and reasoning being applied to things, particularly what they call there's predicate calculus, which is symbolic logic. I've my own views that philosophers have become something of experts of taking logic and really applying it to basically everything. Now, there's this whole field which is the problems of logic, and someone like Wittgenstein would have illustrated problems with that. So awareness, is that like new age? Is that like going to meditation camp? What is awareness? So that's a question I'll just throw up there. um, Chestuder says, science describes life, but it doesn't get to the heart of it. And so I'm going to guess that he sees philosophy as something to be able to take steps beyond what science is doing. Well, let me consider that for a sec. Science has whatever you believe, whatever approach you've put for evaluating evidence, that's also going to be the limitations of science. So, for example, if you're an empiricist, you're going to be limited to data coming in through the senses or through your observational equipment, your telescopes or your machines using to measure data, or your the models you're running on your computers. So philosophy, in a sense, can get past those a little bit. We do, I think, I think in science you still have this idea of building an explanatory model, and I think that's actually a gray area, because you build an explanatory model in the context of like a scientist building an explanatory model, where you're just taking all the data that's known and just saying, well, what's the most consistent? So he's just literally only being inhibited by Occam's razor in a situation like that. Where to me there is a question. Well, what is the difference between that type of scientist uh, and a philosopher? He says trees are aware. Genetics is the tip of the iceberg. Are trees aware? This is an interesting question. Do trees have consciousness? And what's the evidence for that? I would I would ask a general question. Does vegetation have consciousness, and what is the evidence for that? My cat is here. He's saying he has consciousness. It says trees are aware of sunlight. Now, let me ask you a question. If I take a solar panel and point it at the sun and it creates electricity, does that mean the solar panel is aware of the sun? Because it reacts, it has a chemical reaction to the sunlight. trying to talk another member of freetrust.org to join the chat. We're negotiating that in the sidelines now. So Chess Tutor continues. They can communicate a bug attack. Do panels bend to the light on their own? Sorry, I just got a drink. Okay. So what my question is there a does anything reacting to something make it conscious? Okay. So he says, my main point is there are levels of awareness. Dogs are more aware than trees, it seems. So there's a hierarchy of awareness. But even if trees are trees really less aware, and at what point do you just say it's not aware? What would be the difference between a tree being aware and a tree not being aware? Gamby says, I don't think reacting to something makes anything conscious. That would be a pretty low qualification. So just reacting to something. So if there's a standard, I guess, a standard of awareness or consciousness. So I better ask this to Chess Tutor right now. Is awareness and consciousness the same thing, or is awareness something different to consciousness? Because I've been kind of equating them. I've been kind of assuming they're the same, or some people, but maybe what I'm actually doing is conflating them, confusing them. So, but assuming for the moment that they are the same, is there? What's the standard for it? What's the standard for something being aware? Just reacting to something doesn't seem enough. That's what Gamby is saying, and I think I agree with him. So Chess Tutor actually agrees. He says chemical reactions in rocks don't count. So is it just more, is what's happening in a tree just a higher level of complexity, or is there something specific that makes it conscious? Uh, so Gamby says, well, one is dogs have synchronized semi-fields in their brains when they are awake, which are a requirement for awareness for mammals. The So the synchronized semi-field in their brain is a requirement for awareness. I can't speak to that. I don't have the expertise. And also, is that is that a claim from neuroscience or something else? I'm just coordinating the different chatters on freechess.org. So the basic, I'm trying to follow the thread how we got here. I asked the question about whether philosophy, when it talks about religion or science, whether it was really relevant, what the kind of expertise, I guess, the kind of training that philosophy gives people, was it a community, I guess, that brings something relevant to say about those subjects. In an earlier discussion, I was watching a guy in a Google Hangout named Gibran Ludwig. He seemed like a really intelligent guy. I believe I think he's a graduate student in philosophy, but he basically was talking to a group of atheists, and he is one himself apparently. They got really pissed off, and they ended up kicking him out of the discussion. So, and it was just his approach to things that seemed to cause it. Now, there was one or two people on the side. There was an argument. Once he was kicked off, there was an argument that broke out amongst them, and there seemed to be a kind of agreement that it was wrong to kick him off. But at the same time, the guy who was hosting the channel said that he was saying things that are irrelevant, and the channel seemed to agree with that. They just didn't agree with him being kicked out of the discussion, especially since he had shown himself to be polite and intelligent and that sort of thing. It's just that he says a lot of irrelevant philosophical stuff. And, okay. So Gamby now goes on explaining his comment about synchronized. He calls it synchronized EM fields on the cortex only happen during awakeness or to some extent in REM sleep, but not during sleep, etc. This happens at least from rats upwards. Is there something lower than a rat and still a mammal that doesn't have this happen? The guy has, I believe, his YouTube account name is Gibran Ludwig, and he's a guy who's you see him in several chats, usually philosophically or religious topics, and usually like 2 or 3 hours long. So he tells you right away kind of person he is, kind of like me, I guess. He was talking to some people, and he what he said is he started talking about A and B theories of time, And once he got into this, the host of the channel lost his temper and at the end of the day kicked him out of the channel. Said it was bullshit. Kicked him out. I know I've simplified the story a little, but that's really what it came down to. So Gamby told me so he's chatting a little bit with text on freechess.org, but he didn't want to actually join the Google Hangout. And he said it's because he's not an expert yet. He seems to have more expertise than I do on this topic. So we're just asking generally about the YouTube Google Hangout thing. We're all new to this, and we're just learning about it. Hence the hokiness of this whole setup. I'll just say generally that I find that first of all I work in media, and I find the whole idea of the average person being able to do a live broadcast, there's something really empowering about that, and uh, I just find it very interesting and probably a lot of fun, and I see a lot of people have really been engaging in it. And, I find it quite exciting actually, and I hope Google keeps paying for all of this. I wonder how long that's going to last. Right. Gamby makes a point. English isn't his first language, and it might be difficult to try to talk about this stuff in English. I have to admit, if your English is not your first language. Okay, so Chess Tutor says another thing: science measured electricity in the brain, which isn't necessarily the whole story. I think there was something else I've missed on that point. I think I'm missing something. Electricity in the brain. Is that what consciousness is? Electricity in the brain? I hear my cat causing trouble somewhere in the background. So everyone says they hear my audio okay, which is nice. Well, I've got a laptop with a built-in mic, and I'm wearing. What I do is I plug headphones into it. That's what avoids feedback and that kind of issue. how, okay, so Chess Tutor says, it seems like that's how they measure awareness, with electric sensors, right? How can you measure awareness with electric sensors? So back in the day when I was in university, I did take a few classes in psychology, but they were survey courses. In other words, they were courses that did like 100 topics each, and you got just a smattering of each area, so it was nothing in depth, but gave you surveys across the whole field of what's going on. So that there was neuroscience and also cognitive science that might be somewhat related to this. And I can't think of anything in my own training that that really relates. So Chester says, if you're asleep, areas of the brain aren't active. Is that really true? Do, do parts of your brain actually shut down when you're asleep? Gamby says, I don't know if you realize how funny this is. So some interesting studies have been done by anesthetizing one half of the brain and asking questions. And so my question is, well, did you try this experiment yourself? And if so, what drugs did you use? So I'm trying to get one of these guys on freechess.org to join the hangout. The reason is when you have two or three, you can have people chatting in text, but you need at least two people. I think best possibly be three in audio, and then you can have unlimited numbers of people in text. Once you have that once you have that hub of activity in audio that kind of drives everything. You have to think about that for the future, I guess. But if anyone watching the video wants to join, I guess I would invite them if they send me a comment. Just to ask, feeling alone, Maple? Well, the truth is that all I can do is answer people's comments, and I guess that can be interesting as long as I have some kind of interesting thought about it. But, but. There are two veins going. Okay, so Gamby says there are two veins going to each one of the hemispheres, and you can do an anesthetic injection. Sometimes this is done for clinical reasons or such before operating on someone's brain. Chess Tutor says, this is pretty good with just my audio. No, if I suppose if there's enough people chatting, I could just sit there and comment on their chat. Uh, I guess as long as there's enough activity being generated, it could all work. So basically just telling the so by the way, there's a on freechess.org there's a chat channel called Current Affairs, which is channel 41. There's basically text chat going on in there as well. If someone wanted to type a comment on the YouTube page, they could type it there too, and I'll see it. But basically, I've told the text channel on freechess.org that I have invited Gibran, which kind of inspired this whole hangout. I've sent him a message and invited him to talk with me. Maybe we could have a discussion on about what happened to him in that discussion. It sounded to me like, first of all, that it had already been late into the night. That chat had been going, and he was even saying, I remember, I'm getting a little tired. He was having trouble even explaining his own thoughts, and I guess on top of that, everyone, people were getting drunk and tired, and so somehow, sometimes, that mix goes the wrong way, and people get angry. Chess Tutor says, if I remember correctly, each half has different functions, but I forget which is which. So he's talking about left brain, right brain, I'm guessing. So isn't left brain the calculating half and right brain the creative half? And you see, that's about my limit of neurology right there, of my understanding. When I talk, does this show like an audio thing around the symbol? My what do you call it? My portfolio picture, or does it just sit there without me doing anything? So, the chat has slowed down. Has anyone got a comment on what we've talked about so far? But I have to admit, I like discussions like this, which just are not angry and contentious. They're just people trying to help each other learn. So Gamby says, the differences are quite interesting, but the popular simplifications are quite wrong. Both kind of share the functions. Both are important for calculations, logic. Both are important for creativity, intuition. Both are used for languages, and both are used. Both understand language. Okay, so things are kind of slowing down the chat channel. I think I'm going to wrap this Google Hangout up for now, and we could start another one later, possibly on a slightly different topic. Maybe we would focus more on the awareness and consciousness, which seems to be what people find more interesting tonight. Um, Let me just say in conclusion that I think philosophy has its place, both religious and science discussions, and I don't see anyone really showing me otherwise. Okay, so on that note, I think I'm going to wrap this up, and I will talk to you guys all later. Goodbye.